from the MC, and today I'm dealing with family. And the topic of our discussion is basically we have to do the examination of CNS, only the signs of mental irritation and examination of sensory system. Okay, so we start.
मैडम अनम्यूट कर लें, अनम्यूट करें अपने आप। जी बोलें।
Hello,
जी अब आ रही है आवाज़।
G.
ओके स्टार्ट।
So overview of our presentation, and today we deal with the CNS part of the CNS examination, including signs of mental irritation and sensory system examination. So first we discuss the what are the signs of mental irritation, how we assess the signs of mental irritation, and then we discuss the examination of sensory system, that including basic anatomy regarding that, what are the dermatomes, and how we do examination, how we do perform sensory system examination, and finally how we assess, that is where is the lesion. So we start with signs of mental irritation. Basically the term digital signs or meningism same. This basically is the physical finding that develop after any cause of mental irritation. That could be inflammatory cause, a tumor, or hemorrhage that cause meningeal irritation. So inflammation or irritation of the meninges that leads to whenever there is inflammation is present in the meninges, that cause increased resistance to passive flexion of the muscles of the neck and muscles of the limbs. Okay, so absence of meninges whenever there is inflammation, but on examination there are no signs of malnutrition, and you are highly expected that this is a case of meningitis or some hemorrhage. It does not. It's the absence of signs of malnutrition does not exclude it. So it should meningism, but when the signs of meningism is present, that indicates that is the highest probability of infection, blood, or tumor within that meningeal space or subarachnoid space. The basic we have three signs of mental irritation, including the nickel rigidity or neck rigidity, Kernig signs, and Brzezinski sign. Okay, so first this neck stiffness or nickel rigidity sign, and with this, the basic pathology is neck stiffness. This is caused by muscle spasm. The secondary to irritation of the muscle, irritation of the inflamed meninges or nerve roots in the cervical region, and stretching of irritation of the distal spinal roots and nerves that produce grinning signs and lag Brzezinski signs. Okay, whereas the proximal nerve, whenever there is proximal nerve involvements, there is knuckle rigidity sign present and Brzezinski's neck sign is present. And how you perform for to assess the signs of mental irritation, that is the first, the neck rigidity. First you have to make sure that there should be no injury to the cervical region. You ask the patient the history of trauma, or any swelling or severe pain in the neck. So then with the patient you should lie the patient in a spine position, flat without any pillow. Place your hand behind the patient's head like this. Yes. Place your hands behind the neck, your fingers should towards the occiput of the head, and the medial border should towards the parallel to the spinal muscle like this. Okay. So for with the patient, place your hands behind the patient's head with the fingers of your hand placed at the occiput and the ulnar border against the paraspinal muscles, and then you you do not actively flex the head, but only hold the head and ask the patient to move the neck toward until the chin touches the chest. This is the you have to test with the passive flexion, not actively. But when the patient is able to passively flex the neck and the chin touches the chest, it indicates there is no nickel rigidity. Then you can perform it actively. Otherwise, you have to hold the neck with the hands and to place the fingers over the occiput and ulnar border is against the paraspinal muscles, and try to and ask the patient to flex his neck passively, not actively. Okay, until the chin touches the chest. If the patient can easily do it, it indicates there is no nickel rigidity. But if you feel on your hands, that there is increased resistance when the patient try to flex the head, or there are the signs of there is a facial expression of pain over the patient face while during the flexion. It indicates that the neck rigidity or nickel rigidity test is positive. Present, the neck cannot able to fit flexibly, and you feel the spasm in the neck muscle and over your hands. And normally, neck is supple, and the patient can easily bend the head forwardly. Pain in the neck and resistance. Whenever you feel, whenever if the patient feels pain or you feel resistance, that indicates the signs of manual rotation is present or nickel rigidity is positive. It could be due to any infection, it could be due to tumor, it could be due to any hemorrhage in the subarachnoid space. Okay. Secondly, in sport, you usually do not perform signs of manual tradition in children in less than 1.5 to 2 years or 1.5 years or 18 months of age, because they do not coordinate, and most of the time their anterior frontal is open. That's why they usually do not have signs of meningeal irritation. We usually perform signs of meningeal irritation in children more than 2 years of age, patients who are coordinate with you, and that's why only we perform signs of meditation in children more than 2 years of age. That can explain it. Okay? So this is neck rigidity. Neck rigidity is positive when you feel resistance or the patient develop pains when he tries to move the neck, try to flex his neck. That is positive neck rigidity. We perform like this. Okay. And second, Brzezinski's, basically Brzezinski's is not we are not performing Brzezinski's test separately. Brzezinski's is you perform simultaneously when you do the neck rigidity sign and Kerning signs. When you do the when you assess neck rigidity and you flex the neck, when during flexion of the neck, the legs of the neck gets flexed. If you perform neck rigidity and patients, then there is flexion of the leg at the hip and the knee joint. That's called the that is called the Brzezinski's neck test positive. It's performed simultaneously with the test of neck rigidity. When you perform the neck rigidity, the patient's legs gets flexed at the hip and the knee joint. That is called the positive Brzezinski's neck test. Brzezinski's have two parts: neck test, Brzezinski's neck part, and Brzezinski's leg test. So when you perform neck rigidity, if the legs gets flexed, it indicates positive Brzezinski's leg sign. Okay. And when you perform Kerning signs, how you perform it? Place the patient in the supine position with no pillow and expose and fully extend both the legs. Okay, fully extend both the legs. Now you flex one of the patient leg at the hip and the knee joint with your left hand and play with your left hand plates over the medial hamstring muscles like this. You flex the lower limb, one of the limb at the hip joint and at the knee joint, both at the hip joint and the knee joint at 190 at 90-degree angle. And one hand should be placed at the hamstring muscles or over the with the hamstring muscle, and with the second with the right hand you have to extend the limb at the knee joint. Hold the hold the limb over the hamstring muscle so it's not move. Flex the hip joint, flex the knee joint at 90-degree. Then you hold the upper part of the thigh with your right hand, and with your left hand you have to extend that limb at the knee joint. If during that process the patient feels pain or patient's neck gets moved, or the other part, if during this pain the patient develops pain or you feel resistance while extending the neck, whenever at the point where you feel resistant, stop at that point. It indicates that the Kerning sign is positive. Okay, when Kerning sign is positive, when extension reduces pain or it is resisted by the spasm in the hamstring muscle, you feel a spasm, you feel increased resistance at the hamstring muscle, and also you feel resistance of while doing extension of the at the knee joint. That indicates that the Kerning sign is positive. Kerning sign is not present usually in the local causes of neck stiffness. And whenever while doing this science, Kerning signs, or if the other limb also get flux, that is Brzezinski's leg sign. While you performing Kerning sign, Brzezinski's leg sign is also. positive. So you do not perform Brzezinski's test separately. It is simultaneously perform. You perform the Nack-Rigidity test and the Cunning test. Cunning pass is the lack signs of the Brzezinski's, and when you do Nack-Rigidity sign, then the Brzezinski's lack part is performed. Okay, so these are the three signs of if whenever the signs are present, it indicates inflammation at the subarachnoid space. Whatever is the cause, could be due to infection, it could be due to any inflammation due to tumor, or it could be due to the presence of inflammation due to blood in the subarachnoid space. This like you place the hand to the hamstring muscles, or you could place the hand over the anterior part of the thigh, and then you extend the knee, extend the leg at the knee joint. If you feel the resistance at your hamstring muscles, or you feel resistance while extending the neck, it indicates Kerning signs is positive. And while performing this maneuver, if the other leg or the if you perform on the right side, the left leg also get flexed, it indicates Brzezinski's leg sign positive. So all these three signs are these are the signs of meningeal adhesion. Now we deal with now we start with examination of the sensory system. Before you how you perform sensory system examination, the important we have to discuss the important anatomical points and the basic rules to perform sensory system examination. Basically, the sensation these are of two types: primary sensation and the cortical sensation. What are the primary sensations? Primary sensations, including the touch, pain, both superficial and deep pain, temperature, position sensations, position, passive movement sensations, and vibration sensation. These are all the primary sensations. And what are the cortical sensations? That includes the signs of localization, 2-point discrimination, stereogenesis, graphesthesia. These are the cortical sensations. Basically, the primary sensations, this is the peripheral nerves, and the cortical sensations that is only related to the cerebral part of the brain. The peripheral sensations, these are carried by the two different afferent pathways, including the spinothalamic tract and the dorsal column tract. Spinothalamic tract basically carries the pain sensation, touch and crude touch, not the light touch, but pain, temperature, and crude touch sensation. These are carried by the small, slow conducting fibers of the spinothalamic tract. And basically, the spinothalamic tract, this starts from the periphery. The nerves enter the spinal cord, and the the fibers of that nerve cross at the same or one level above that vertebral level to the other part of the spine, and then it extended upward up to the thalamus. The second relies at the thalamus, and then from the fibers from the thalamus, second order neurons goes to the sensory parts of the cerebral hemisphere, like this. This this is the spinothalamic tract. This is the peripheral nerve. Then the nerves from the receptor, the fibers passes to the spinal root at the same level. Then it will line the nucleus and over the horn, anterior horn. Then at the same level or one cord level above that, it crosses towards the opposite side, and then it descends on the opposite side of the body. From opposite side of the body, and it first relies at the level of the thalamus, and the second rely say this at the level. This is the thalamus. Yes. This is the second order neuron, and that is rely at the thalamus, and from the thalamus, this then the nerves rely at the sensory part of the cerebral hemisphere, and opposite to that, dorsal column or the second is this dorsal column tract that carries the joint position sensation, vibratory sensation, and the light touch sensation. These light touch, joint position sensation, and vibration sensation, these are conducted by the large fasting curve fibers that pass in the posterior column or the dorsal column of the joint, and it starts from the periphery, and then from the receptor to the peripheries. From the peripheries, you enter the cord, and then it moves on the same side. Do not cross at the same level of the cord, but it moves upward on the same side of the track and up to the base of the brain. This brain stem, and at the level of the brain stem, then they cross towards the opposite side, and then it first rely on the thalamus and then finally terminate in the cerebral part of the sensory part of the cerebral hemisphere to the opposite side of the body, like this. This is the dorsal root. From the receptors, these that nerves carry. Okay, so these are the fibers that do not that rely on the posterior ones. Okay, then they carry the sensation on the same side till the base of the brain. At the base of the brain, they cross to the opposite side. This is the base of the brain. They cross to the opposite side at the level of them, not at the same level. And then they extend upward up to the thalamus, and from the thalamus, the fibers rely on the sensory part of the cortex. So upon this is conscious position, they travel from the periphery entering the spinal cord and then move on the same side up to the base of the brain, and then at the level of the brainstem it crosses towards the opposite side, and then the fibers rely at the thalamus and finally terminate in the cerebral hemisphere on the opposite side of the brain from where they begin. Okay, and all the sensory fibers rely in the thalamus before sending information towards the sensory cortex of the brain, in sensory cortex in the parietal lobe. Okay, like this. And the sensory cortex of the brain is the presentation is it. That is a large part of the brain is covering the sensation of the foot and upper and lower limb, and the large part covering the sensation of the hands. Touch, because it's the fine movements is very sensitive, and it's covered most of the sensory cortex is covered by the covering the upper limb and the lower limb movements, and this is covered by the face, and these are the representing the trunk only. So, and then this is the basic anatomy, and then now we discuss the dermatome, because to assess where is the lesion and for localizing where is the sensory dysfunction, you have to know what is the basic dermatomal or nerve supply, and for that you have to know how the dermatomes of the body supply. Because if you assess that there is a defect in sensation in the upper in the typical part of the upper limb like this, you have to know what is the dermatable supply of that part. If you know the dermatable supply, you can easily say that C5 or C6 is involved of this patient. C6 is involved. C6 nerve or C8 nerve is involving of this patient is involving. So you have to know what is the dermatable supply. So the basic you have to know that C1 and C2 have no dermatable supply. C3 is basically supply the back of the scalp, and C4 is supply the collar part of the collar part of the neck. Okay. So C3 is supplying the back of the occiput, C4 supplying the collar part of the neck, and then the C5. C5 just before the below the collar is C5, and C5 extending interiorly. If you place your hand in the front position, then it's a C5. This is the C5. C5 supply the just below the collar part of the body. This is the skin supply. Okay, and shoulder tip is supplied by C6, but most of the anterior part is supplied by the C5 in the middle. C6 supplied by below that, and C6 is supplying on anteriorly and posteriorly of the lateral side like this. This is whole supplied by the C6 from here just below the C5. This is C6 supplying whole of the from the back, and from the front it supplies the lateral part up to the thumb. Whole of the thumb is supplied by C6. Thumb C6, and part of the upper limb and part of the upper lip of the lateral side is supplied by the C6. Middle of anterior is supplied by the C5, but the back is supplied by the C7. This is the C7. Just below the C6 is the C7, and it supply part of the this is part of the trunk like this. And most C7 is basically supply the back of the hand, upper limb, upper arm and the lower arm, and the two fingers, both anteriorly, anteriorly from the front and back is supplied by index, and the middle finger is supplied by C7. Anteriorly only it supply the middle and the index fingers, and at the back it supply the whole of the back of the upper arm and the lower arm. But the front, upper arm, lower arm is basically supplied by the C5. And then C8 supplies this medial part, whole of the back of the arm, and the little finger and the ring finger, and both anteriorly and posteriorly supplied by the C8. So when you consider the hand, thumb is supplied by the C6, index and the middle finger is supplied by C7, and the two little finger and index finger is supplied by the C8, and part of that upper arm and this arm and upper arm is supplied by the C8. And middle is supplied by the C7 at the back, and in front it is supplied by the C5 and T1. T1 basically at the level of the thoracic 1 vertebra, and it also supplies the axillary region. This is part of the axillary region and apart from the anterior, not at the back. Only at the back it supplies the T1 level at the trunk. At the front, it is also supply a part of the upper arm and then also the axilla. This is the dermatome supply of the upper limb. You have to know the back of the occiput is supplied by C3, C4 is at the collarbone, C3 below that, and it's C5 is below that, C4 just below the collar, and it supplies the lateral part. It will supply the anterior, only the anterior part over the deltoid region. C6 supplies the lateral part up to the thumb. C7 supply only the back of the arm, back of the middle of the arm, and up to the two fingers, index and the middle finger. While C8 supplying from the axilla, both anteriorly and posteriorly, it supplies the upper arm and forearm and upper arm, and it also supplies the middle finger and the ring finger. While T1 supplies the part of the trunk at the level of T1, it supplies the axilla and the anterior part, a part of the upper limb also. This is the basic dermatome upper limb supply. Then first we deal with the trunk. In the trunk, 3 points are very important. Below just T1 level, you have to know that at the xiphisternum, the dermatome is C7. At umbilicus, the dermatome is C10. This is dermatome. This is C10. This is C7 and C12. Inguinal region is C12. So 3 points are important. T1 at the thoracic 1 level, and at the nipple it is T4. At xiphisternum it is T7. At umbilicus it is T10, and at the inguinal region it is T12. So at the trunk, the important point, the T1 is at the T1. This is from the limb. Okay, this is T1. At the level of the nipple is T4. So, okay. At the level of xiphisternum it is T7. At umbilical region it is T10, and at the inguinal region it is T12. It is the the dermatomal supply of the trunk. And now the upper limb, in the lower limb, we start with from the lateral to medial side. We start with the L1, L2, and L3 basically supply the thigh, part of the thigh. L4, starting from the most lateral part of the thigh, it goes towards the medial side and it supplies the leg also. From here, like this, from the upper, from thigh to the leg, from lateral to medial side, like this. When you take from the front, L1 at the inguinal region, L2 from lateral to medial side, goes always towards the from lateral to medial side, L1, L2, L3. L3 covers half of the L4 not only supplying the thigh, it also supplying from lateral to medial side, it supply whole of the upper thigh, leg, and whole of this upper great toe. This is supplied by L4 from lateral to medial side. This is the L4. Now L5 is at the mid of the front, and these 3 fingers, 3 toes. Big toe is supplied L4, and then these 3 toes, these are supplied by L5, and this little toe is supplied by S1. S1 little toe. The 3 fingers, these are supplied by L5, and the great toe is supplied by L4. L4 from thigh up to the leg and up to the toe. This is L4. And L5 starts from the leg, from the lateral part of the neck towards the middle fingers. And L5 also supplies the heel. Heel as L5. Heel, 3 fingers, and apart from the anterior, this is supplied by the L5. S1 is basically supplying this lateral part from this lateral toe, and the back of the leg is basically supplied by S1 and S2. The leg S1, S2. From the lateral and middle part is S1 and S2, and the medial part is basically supplied by L4, L3, L1, 2 from adjacent side. These are so when you take the back of the lower limb, it is basically supplied by S1 and S2, and heel is supplied by L5. At the gluteal region, S3, S4, and S5 supply the gluteal region. Around the anus perianal region is supplied by S5, and around that S4 and S3. And basic whole of the leg at the back is supplied by S1 and S2. heel by L5, and front of the leg from atrial to lateral, from above is L1, L2, L3, L4 of supply the thigh. L4 supply the thigh as well as the leg from lateral to the medial side, and to supply the grade 2 also. This is the basic the dermatomal supply of lower limb. When you know that is the dermal supply, if there is loss of sensation at the knee, then you have to know that is that L4 and L5 is involved. Okay, if the grade 2 have no sensation, it indicates that L4 is involved. If little finger is a little toe gets involved at the heel, little toe gets involved, it indicates S1 fibers are affected. And if the heel have no sensations, or then it indicates L5 is get affected. If there is no sensation around the anal region, it indicates S5 and S4 is involved. If there is sensation of the sphincter muscles is there, and there is no loss of defecation, the patient there is no incontinency of a stool, it indicates S3, S4, and S5s are intact. Okay, that is the importance that you have to know the dermatomal supply. This is the dermatome, and so there are basic some rules before starting the sensory system examination. First, you have to know that what is the anatomy. Then you have to, when you start the sensory system examination, a complete sensory examination is possible only